When did the school bully get what they deserved? He picked on this one smaller kid near the kid's locker. Well, the smaller kid hit him across the head with his combination lock. There was a lot of blood and blubbering. Oddly enough, however, he tried to beat up the smaller kid a second time in shop class. This time, the same kid took a 2x4 to the bully's shins. He left the kid alone after that. He wasn't really that successful at bullying, though it certainly wasn't for a lack of trying. Next story. He kept on messing with this skinny kid in my classroom. He is about my height and weight, and one day the kid had enough, so he picked up the dude and body slammed him to the ground. It turns out he is actually a black belt, and he was in boxing as well. Meanwhile, the bully was just one of those average football jocks. I like how OP said he's about my height and weight, and then didn't clarify on anything. Like, he looked like me. No relevance to the story. We were wearing the same shirt. Doesn't describe the shirt. Thank you for that information, or lack thereof. Anyway, next story. So, this particular bully once pushed me across the school bus seat hard enough that I cracked a window because I had the nerve to sit in the aisle seat that he wanted. And somehow it was both of our faults because I refused to move when he demanded it, and our parents had to split the repair cost. Then, 10 plus years after high school, I've got a successful career and had just bought my first home in a very walkable part of town. That said, the nearest liquor store is a bit of a dump, but hey, it's well stocked. I go there to buy some beer, and guess who's working the checkout counter? Yup, it was him. Given how long ago this was, though, I'm polite, I'm pleasant to him, especially when he asks me how I've been, and I say doing great. Graduated from college, my job is great, and I just bought a new house a few blocks down the road. How are you doing? And I don't remember his response, but I know he avoided eye contact afterwards. Next story. When I beat her ass. I went to school counseling with her, did so many bully interventions, and still no progress with her. The day before, she made fun of a sweet little girl that I stood up for, and we got in trouble. I threatened her and we had an argument. The next day, she slaps me hard for no reason. Joke was on her though, because I had experience fighting my boy cousins. She got wrecked and didn't show up to school for a week. Next story. I had a kid who would follow me home pushing me every few steps. I was a big weenie back then, so he thought he could get away with it. Day 2 of this, I waited until we were alone. He went in for a push, and I grabbed him and sort of did what my 5th grader brain imagined a headlock to be. Then I walked him around like that for a couple of minutes, pushed him over, and spit on him. He avoided me after that. Next story. Early 90s high school. One kid was always getting picked on for being effeminate. Senior year in a science class, he finally had enough from one of his biggest tormentors, and they got physical. Teacher finally broke it up after the bully got his face slammed on one of those stone lab tables. And don't know what happened to the bully, but years later, we saw the other kid in the audience of Jenny Jones or Ricky Lake, apparently out and proud and having a good old life. Next story. The guy was just a big lumbering oaf of a bloke who I had gotten on with okay until our final test in college. The lecturer left the room briefly and this bloke just stood up, looked at my answers and said, "Oh right, I don't know that one," and copied my answer. Me, being the little jerkhead, just leant across and scribbled across his page. He stood up and hit me so hard I had a concussion on both sides of my skull. One side from where he hit me, and the other side from where my head hit the table so hard. I finished my test and excused myself to pass out unconscious in a hallway hiding under some stairs, and I think my fight or flight kicked in a little late. The guy got banned from the college, though, for life. As well, got criminal charges for assault and lost his job too, as we were all apprentices for different engineering companies during our first year together. This is where I feel bad though. Whilst having x-rays for concussion, an x-ray tech noticed a dark mass, and it turns out I had a significant tumor on the pituitary gland, so he kinda saved my life. I've always said if I do win the lottery, I will sort him out for saving my life. Next story. He picked a fight with a smaller kid who was built like a fire plug and on the wrestling team. It did not end well for him. Happened right in front of my lunch table by the tray drop-off. Dude actually stabbed the wrestler in the head with a fork, which bent and only pissed him off. Wrestler picked the guy up and slammed him, then did it again. He hit that boy with a planet. Twice. Next story. Not a huge bully, but not a huge karma either. I was in orchestra in high school, and we had this one really mean girl. Thought she was better than everyone else. Would mock us, would laugh as her boyfriend would knock over your music stand while you were trying to practice, and told everyone she was going to be a world-famous violinist. Junior year, she was second chair because our first chair was a senior who was so good she was hired to play private events. Senior graduated, and little miss all that thought she'd get first chair. Nope. We had an absolute prodigy transfer in from the local music magnet school. played 6 instruments and composed, and got told she could only keep one and kept violin. So the other girl stayed second chair. No matter though, she's still brilliant, bragged to everyone she's going to audition for Juilliard and go there. A local state college actually has a really well-known music college, but that was for peons. She was going to NYC. Then ran into her 5 years later working retail at a local craft store. Largely pregnant and with kid number 3. Crappy high school boyfriend knocked her up just after graduation and she didn't get to go to college at all. Plus, poor thing was stuck actually living with him. And given how abusive he was to anybody else around him, that couldn't be fun. I asked if she still played for fun, but she said she hadn't touched an instrument in years. Actually felt sorry for her. More now than I did at the time, but even then I realized she messed up her life with that douchebag. She actually was a good violinist, too. Probably not Juilliard level, but definitely local music college and a major city orchestra level with practice. Next story. My first and only fight I instigated. I shoved him at a lunch when he was making fun of kids doing sign language. I told him, meet me down the street after school. He made fake gang signs and mimicked the voice of the deaf kid who had friends who could hear that were learning sign, and I snapped. He showed up to the fight with a baseball batting glove on one hand. I said, nice Michael Jackson glove, then punched him in the nose as hard as I could. Wasn't much of a fight. I punched him. He started leaking. He turned his back to the fight, holding his nose. I chirped at him, and he never said anything to those kids again, and I never got suspended. Funny enough, he was taller than me, but not much heavier in high school. But currently, he's about 6'5" and 280 pounds and would absolutely whoop me. He's a normal guy now with a wife and kids, and not an insufferable jerk. Next story. He would always pick on a heavy-set girl, and one day, she snapped. She gave him a few good gut punches and a swift kick in the nuts. She was in the process of trying to stuff him into a locker when a teacher came and broke everything up, and he never ever lived it down. Next story. I had a bully in elementary school. He was bigger than me, so I couldn't fight him. One morning, though, in my early 20s, I went to take my car to the dealer to get it washed. I handed the attendant my keys without noticing, and it was my bully. This could have been a moment for me to be a complete ass and get my revenge, but I smiled and chatted with him for a bit. He was working on an apprenticeship to become a mechanic at the car dealer. The best kind of revenge is living well, but it's even better when you meet adversaries with humility and kindness. Next story. This one may come across as dark. The kid that used to bully me, relentlessly picking on me until I lost my cool and got in trouble, but he was never punished. I hated him with a burning passion. Early in his adulthood, he was stricken by grand mal seizures, and now he lives in a wheelchair. I guess we could argue that he didn't deserve it, but you'll never convince 10-year-old me that. Next story. One day, it reached the tipping point, and I smacked him in the face so hard, he went to the ground crying like a baby in front of the whole class. I didn't even realize what I did. It just all went on autopilot mode because I was so stressed out and on edge for months of consistent bullying. Never been bullied from that day, though, and the douchebag also stopped bullying others. I was then pondering why it took me so long to realize these people only understand one kind of message. Next story. The revenge basically was him taking my snacks, so I went to Poland on vacation during the summer holiday. Brought back a 6-pack of extremely spicy crisps that probably aren't legal in the UK, ate 5-packs, and collected the dust from them. These crisps have an unusual amount of dust in the corners as opposed to other types of crisps, and then put them into the last pack and resealed it. Well, he stole it and ate the whole damn thing, and he was red with snot coming out of his nose. On the way to the toilets, he had his DS and it somehow ejected the game, and I took it while he was dipping snot onto the ground. Thankfully, the game survived. Next story. My bully tormented me for years, made my life hell. He was popular, a jock, prom king, super ripped, etc., which made it worse. But even though he was all of those things, I could just tell no one really liked or trusted him anyway. He was a narcissistic a-hole. I think people pretended to like him out of fear. Anyway, about 5 years out of high school, I'm back in my hometown visiting friends. We went out for drinks and then started walking to a friend's house to hang some more. It's about midnight at this point. It's a residential street, and we hear a weird bang up the street, but we didn't see anything. But as we walk closer, we see a weird, large shape in the middle of the street. We were like, what the hell, is that a UFO? And as we get closer, a car that drove by pulls over by it, and the driver gets out to inspect. Then we figure out what it is from about 30 yards away. It's a truck, like a lifted Tacoma maybe, completely flipped upside down on its roof. My friends, the guy who pulled over, and myself, we inspect the truck. It was a strange sight. Aside from being completely upside down, it was in perfect shape. The lights were on, the driver's side door open, and we were like, WTF? As we inspect some more though, my friend says, look, it's a wallet. It was here on the street, must have fallen as the guy ran away. We gather around my friend as she opens up the wallet. We look at the driver's license inside. It's my bully from high school. We all knew him, so we immediately started sharing stories about what a jerk he was, and we were all eager to call up the cops. But this was an era before we all had cell phones, but one of my friends did, and her dad was a cop, so she called her dad. And her dad sent squad cars to the truck and to the bully's house. Turns out he had several DUIs and a rap sheet for drugs and bar fights. He got thrown in jail for a while. Over the years, I've been told he's been in and out of jail and has been dealing with issues from steroid use and alcoholism. We're well in our 40s now, and he still lives at home last I heard. Nothing warms my heart more than knowing that prick has had a miserable life. Alright, so this story didn't go the way I personally thought, or at least felt it would, given what happened with the car dealership. I thought the person was the bully in the car, but they were gonna save him, and he's gonna be like, oh my god, it's you! Or maybe the bully died or something, I don't know. I thought this was going to be one of those I forgive you moments because you saved me and, oh man, I've been a jerk this whole time, but now he's in jail. Oh well, next story. So, there was a kid in 4th grade named Jacob who was different. He liked reading fantasy books instead of watching sports, wore bright colors, and talked with his hands. The school bully tormented him daily, calling him gay and making sure everyone knew he was a loser. It got so bad that Jacob started skipping school. Eventually, Jacob's dad demanded a parent-teacher conference with everyone involved, and I'll never forget his dad's face. Not angry, just deeply sad. My son cries himself to sleep, he said quietly. He asked me to change schools. He spends recess hiding in bathroom stalls. He thinks something's wrong with him for being who he is. And the guidance counselor asked the bully why this was happening, and he just shrugged. He received detention and went home quietly. The reason I know all of this happened is because I was that bully. During that meeting, I realized how much I was hurting Jacob, how I was the villain, and it was because I was so insecure. I think I figured out that if I pointed attention at someone weirder than me, I would be safe. No one would make fun of me. Jacob was just collateral damage in my plan to not be a target. I apologized to Jacob the next day and actually got to know him over the next few weeks. By middle school, I became someone who stood up for kids who were different because I finally understood the damage that I had caused. Sometimes the bully just needs to see the real-life pain that they're creating. Next story. Big a-hole at my school got into a drunk driving accident in his sophomore year and ended up with mental disabilities. He was a racist piece of crap who used to try and always steal answers off of me, so I was cool with it. His sister was a giant B-word too, and people used to make jokes about him to get her to F off. Next story. I had two main ones, Jameson and Arturo. Jameson dropped out of high school and ended up couch surfing until his friends had had enough of him. He ended up getting arrested and put away for 2 years because he threatened his ex and tried to break into her house. I just happened to be in court for a traffic violation when he went in for his first hearing on the trespassing charge. Then Arturo had a good football career in high school, got with a bunch of girls, and ended up getting 5 of them pregnant. After high school, he disappeared. I assume he dipped to avoid child support. Next story. This probably won't go to the extent that is intended for this kind of question, but I photograph for a professional baseball team, and one day I'm on the field taking some pictures, and I hear someone shout my name, and I look behind the net and see a guy that bullied me in high school waving at me. I was friendly and all, but in my head I'm like, yeah, stay behind the net, you jerk. I'm on the field and you're not. Next story. In college, we had a mutual female friend whose boyfriend was verbally and physically abusive, unbeknownst to us at the time. One night, we were at a house party where we had some drinks and started raising his voice aggressively at her and trying to drag her out of the party. He calmed down, but it happened again, and then he slapped her. He was thrown out of the party and proceeded to try to break down the front door to get back in. But he was greeted with fists from a dozen or so partygoers as the scuffle spilled onto the sidewalk. Another party was happening down the block. There were people on the porch who asked why he was getting jumped. We told them that he hit his girlfriend, and then another dozen or so angry guys joined in on the jumping. Eventually, sirens in the distance caused the mob to scatter back to their parties. He crawled into his vehicle to leave as the cops showed up, but he was promptly arrested for DUI. The police made very little effort to investigate why this guy got his ass beat. F that dude. Next story. This was by no means the school bully, but he was a bully to me. bigger than me by 6 inches in all dimensions. He had this annoying habit of walking just behind me and stepping on my shoe at the back of my foot just so my foot would come out of the shoe. This happened way too often. Then, one day, and for the very last time, he did it again. But something came over me, and I spun around and rammed my palm into his nose with the full momentum acquired of pent-up rage. I had learned recently that hitting with a bunched-up fist can damage one's own fingers compared to using the palm of one's hand, but I didn't realize until that moment that I had internalized that fact. But what a beautiful strike that was. I'm sure I broke his nose, but my vision was too blurred by my own stunning achievement. And he never troubled me again. In fact, I don't remember his presence at all after that. Unfortunately, stories of this encounter went around the school, and I sadly acquired this reputation of a martial artist. Bruce Lee's movies had just become popular at the time, which attracted the unsavory attentions of bigger boys in higher classes who wanted to test my skills. Nothing came of it, and I was very happy that phase got over without further ado. Next story. So, I tell this one a lot, but I was not a big kid ever. 5'9", 152 pounds in high school, and I joined the wrestling team and got deceptively strong, fast, and gained a lot of skills through wrestling. Then, my junior year, there was a bully that transferred from another school named Jeremiah. He immediately started picking on kids smaller than him, and he was about 6'2", 200 pounds. Well, at the time this happened, it was outside of a wrestling season, and we didn't have a wrestling room, so we had to roll out a mat in the boys' locker room and practice in there. Well, Jeremiah was on the football team at the time and started making fun of one of the younger wrestlers that he had been bullying, I found out later. So, well, I called him out and challenged him to a match and said, "What you think, you're so tough you can't take me? Bring your ass to the mat and back up that talk." Well, he couldn't back down because other football players were there, so they immediately started egging him on. So he came to the mat with a smirk and started talking trash. We started the match, and with him not being a wrestler, I easily tricked him by pretending I was going after his head and instead went low. I got him in a double leg and picked him up on my shoulder, so now he's off the ground completely. I held him for a couple of seconds while he struggled, reared back, and slammed him as hard as I could onto his back. The football players went nuts, started making fun of him, and I got up and looked down at him, and his nose was bleeding. I then helped him back up, took him to the sinks, which were right around the corner, and got him all cleaned up, and all he said was, "Damn, dude, you slapped the crap out of me." And I said, "Hey, do me a favor. Just don't F with my wrestlers anymore, and a matter of fact, look after them when I'm not around." And he just said, "Yeah, you got it, man. Don't want to get slammed again." And after that, we actually became friends, and he started calling me Grande Huevos every time he saw me, and he was no longer the school bully. Amazing, love it, best story, I am amazed. Guys, is the cure to male loneliness just getting your ass beat? Getting the bully beat out of you? The cure to male loneliness is forming a bond with a bro by beating each other up. That is some real boys will be boys stuff right there. Anyway, next story. We had this little 7th grader craphead named Chard, who looked like a pint-sized Scott Bio and liked to shove around and threaten to beat up kids smaller than him. He was the kind of kid who wore those idiotic wrist sweatbands like they were the leather cuffs of a cage fighter. Anyway, 8th grade starts, and Chard is still pushing smaller, weaker kids around. But now, there's a new kid at our school, this pale, overweight, red-headed kid. I think the kid's name was Alex. Well, Chard sees this kid and must have salivated. Fat and a pale redhead? This kid must have seemed like a victim custom-made for Chard's attention. So Chard starts pushing Alex around, and I think Alex, who probably had his fill of getting bullied and probably weighed twice as much as Chard, not only fought back, but just unleashed on Chard and used his greater weight and his rage against that little craphead. Beat Chard to a pulp before Mr. Brogner was able to stop the one-sided beating. Little Chard is in his elastic rest sweatbands and didn't seem to push people around after that. It was glorious. Next story. One of my bullies grew up to have a daughter who is a high-achieving little nerd, just like I was when she bullied me. And she had to send her kid to school every day knowing exactly how she was likely to be treated by her peers. And there's nothing she can do about it. Next story. There was a kid who would bully everyone on our bus stop in middle school. He would start at insults, but if you ignored those, he would get physical and start pulling on clothes to stop you or shove you unexpectedly. His buddy would circle you so you couldn't get away too. Now me, I was bigger
bigger than him. I was a quiet guy. I played viola in our middle school orchestra. However, I was naturally built. But I tended to get asked to play football too, as the other kids couldn't stop me from moving when they tried to tackle me. So, while no one expected me to get physical, they also didn't screw with me directly. Well, one day, he and his buddy shoved my friend to the ground and started shaking him and taking swings at him. So, I took my viola in its fabric-covered hard case and swung real hard. It hit him and knocked him off my buddy. And he ran home crying to his parents. They showed up at my house and I explained what happened to my parents. They in turn told his parents he shouldn't start crap and that if they raised their kid better, this wouldn't happen. Next story. He went on to join ISIS, made a big spiel about burning his Canadian passport, and then was killed by a US military airstrike. I still have strong feelings about how Canada's own flavors of racism push immigrant and refugee boys down that particular pipeline, but man, if my shoulders didn't relax for half a second when I saw the news article declaring him dead. Next story. He wasn't a school bully, but he always bullied me. Always bragged that he'd be at MIT, invent new things, thought he was better than everyone else, insulted me and my other friends, would sometimes punch me, and bragged about how much money and women he would have. Last I heard, he's living with his parents still at 26, single, is an IT tech support guy, and graduated from one of the local colleges. And no, I'm not saying living with your parents, having that job, and being single is bad, but it's such a sharp contrast to the life he said he would have and made others feel bad about not striving towards. He did lose a lot of weight though, so good for him. Next story. She made fun of me for being fat. Me? I left our hometown, got a degree, traveled all over the world, fell in love with the sweetest man ever, and I got fit. She is still there, had 4 kids all by different men, is divorced as many times, and now she's fat. Take that, Kelly. Next story. From the time that I started school, I was always much larger in height and weight from the other kids. In 5th grade, I was 5'4", 145 pounds. When I got into 7th grade, I was still one of the bigger kids in school, and I learned back in elementary that I had to watch my strength because I could easily hurt other kids. So by 8th grade, I was in the habit of letting people who tried to pick on me eat silence. Then there were these identical twin brothers, both the worst type of humans that can exist. One day, as I was walking to my parents' car after school, one of them ran up and punched me in the back of the head, and then they both raced over to their mother's car. But I had had enough, and I raced up and I caught them both. Since they were identical twins, I didn't know who did what, so I started hitting both of them repeatedly with everything I had. I came from a very bad neighborhood and knew how to and was never afraid to fight if I had to. So I let out 3 years of frustration with these two and their handful of friends picking on me, bullying me and others, and just flipped out. The other parents must have hated these 2 brothers as well because they just let me punch these 2 into oblivion. Finally, my father pulled me off of the bloody bodies of one of them, but by the time the principal got there, the one who had punched me had an obvious broken arm and jaw, and the other one had a broken leg and an eye socket. Their mother said my attack was unprovoked, but the parents who witnessed this all said the opposite, and the 2 parents described how the boys assaulted me first. The principal was afraid of their mother and tried to have me suspended and sent to a school for those with behavioral issues, and that's when my mother and teachers stepped in and told the principal how I had been taking the bullying from those 2 kids for years. After that, they left me and everyone else alone, and all of their friends who used to join in on their bullying simply stopped. Next story. He loved flaunting his wealth with designer clothes and later in high school a brand new Mustang. But bumped into him a few years later and I find out his parents went full stupid and pissed away most of every dime to their name on Scientology. Next story. He insulted this dude's girlfriend and got confronted in the school bathroom. Got the crap slapped out of him, so he locked himself in the stall. When he came back to class whimpering, he grabbed his stuff and got into an argument with a substitute teacher about leaving, which the sub won, and he spent the rest of the class pouting. The next day, as soon as he walked into class, everyone pointed and laughed at him. To make it worse, the prettiest girl in class was the first one and loudest to do so. He left the room, and I literally never saw him again. Next story. I grew up in an awful neighborhood.
One girl was the real ringleader of the girls who bullied me. She beat the effing hell out of me. Once, she came outside with a TV tray, like the legs that were attached, and beat it over my head until it broke. She was really twice my size easily, and I never once fought her off. But the kids grow up, we moved, I went off to college, and honestly, I kinda did forget about her. But one day, she was in the news. She had died in her apartment of a GI bleed, and her landlord had found her several weeks later. She also had a baby in the apartment that did not survive that time alone. And I will never stop thinking about that baby's last days, hours. I will never stop wondering why she lived a life that no one but the landlord ever even went looking for her when she went missing, when her baby went missing. And I don't know what was wrong with her that made her a bully, but I know she didn't get to resolve it. Her short life was probably as full of as much or more pain than she ever inflicted on anyone else. But I don't hate her anymore, and I grieved for her child for her. Next story. A group of 3 brothers all bullied at our high school, always trying to fight for no reason. One day after high school in the neighborhood, they picked on the wrong guy. A senior at my school, big Latino dude, was walking down the street and the 3 brothers jumped him. He proceeded to beat the hell out of all 3 at once. Their alcoholic dad heard the commotion and came outside to step in. And he also got the hell beat out of him. There were other students from my school watching, so when we got to school the next day, everyone had heard the news. Hard to be tough when one teenager beat the F out of all 3 brothers and their dad. Next story. It was class picture day in 8th grade. That means that every single 8th grader in the school was in the school gym at the same time. Everyone was up on the bleachers, except for me, and the scumbag that had been bullying me for 5 to 6 years, Pat Carney. I only use his actual name because he's a piece of human excrement, and I really don't care. Anyway, a little background. By the time I was in 8th grade, I was already 6'2". Very skinny, but 6'2". Basically, had been bullied my entire life. This day was gonna be like every other as usual. The piece of human excrement walked up to me and began making fun of my somewhat unusual first name, as usual. For once in my life, though, I actually responded and turned around and I called him the F slur. It was 1978, and he used the old bully standard of, "What did you say to me?" and then swung at me. But I went off. Full tilt psychopath, punching as hard and as fast as I could. I actually thought this kid was going to kill me, so I figured I might as well go down swinging. And it took 2 gym teachers to pull me off of him. He got suspended for 3 days for starting the fight, and I actually got suspended for half a day for engaging in the fight. The vice principal told my mom that she knew that this kid had been bullying me for years and that he heard that I got a few good punches in. I was called Rocky until the end of the year. I'm not proud of that moment, though, as he was able to still stand up after I was done. 47 years later, I still despise that animal. Next story. There was a group of guys who sort of acted like friends at first, but then would belittle me and make fun of the things I liked to absolutely no end. One day, it got physical, and a basketball was pelted right at my face for absolutely no reason, and the school did nothing. Well, 2 of them are dead of an overdose, and 1 is in an active addiction doing horribly. I feel bad about laughing about it, but they continued even after we all became legal adults. Karma is a you-know-what. Next story. When he picked on the young kid on the bus, I had enough of it, and I walked up to the aisle, threw my hand off his face, and dropped him with 1 punch. Problem solved. 20 years later, I see him stocking shelves at a local grocery store. He sees me and immediately apologizes for what an a-hole he was to people in high school. Next story. Guy on his 14th round of 11th grade shoved me, and I kicked him in the side of the knee. Turns out he'd just gotten knee surgery on that knee, went down wailing and had to get more surgery. Still walks with a limp last time I saw. I'm very proud of that one. He effed around, and he found out. Not my fault he didn't think anyone would hit back, and I'd have done exactly the same if I knew about the surgery. Next story. One that used to bully me and pretty much everyone kept going after high school. He joined the military and got kicked out for his violent endeavors. Then he and some of his fellow soldiers were terrorizing the local bars whenever they had some free time. They would get drunk, high on coke, and start fights, stalk barmaids after closing time, vandalize car, the works. And so after being kicked out, he did the only thing he could do. Harder and cheaper drugs. He's now a ghoul. He hasn't got a muscle left on him, and he deals with every social interaction like his life is in danger because he can't remember who he wronged in the past. And I only know of this because he came to my house to collect various bits of scrap metal I was throwing away. I instantly recognized him. I knew he recognized me too, but he and his buddies had kicked my ass in a bar just out of the blue years ago, but couldn't exactly figure out from where or when. That's right, he's the local drugged-up junker. Next story. A kid transferred to my high school my sophomore year from a school in a bigger city and thought he was a badass because he was in a gang. Dude was a middle-class white kid and about 150 pounds soaking wet, by the way. Anyhow, he did all of your typical bully stuff, stealing money, harassing thespians, nerdy kids, making teachers' lives hell, etc. I honestly don't know why nobody put him in his place, but that guy was a menace. Then, one day, he turned his attention to a set of twins who were developmentally challenged. Now, these two kids were loved by everyone in my high school, but especially the football team. The twins were unofficially part of the team and helped out at practices, filled water bottles, and set up cones. This little twerp thought it would be funny to convince them that their mom had inappropriate relations with an athlete they loved. But, unfortunately for him, the whole conversation was overheard by a couple of varsity offensive linemen. So, later that day, a group of about 6 football players got a hold of the jerk and duct taped him to one of the support beams in the student center, with his pants around his ankles. The weird part was how all of the teachers, janitors, security guards, and other students, they just walked past him and couldn't hear his screaming. He got left up there for a good hour before the vice principal got him down, but not before he pissed himself, which I do feel kind of bad for him for that part. But I think he made it another 2-ish weeks before he transferred to an alternative school. Good riddance to Kenny. Next story. When they kept picking on someone much bigger than his scrawny ass until that person snapped and beat the crap out of him until he blacked out. Me, I had heard about it and saw a photo of his face. This was a couple of years after high school too, so I guess he hadn't changed at all. And he wasn't tough, physically strong, or intimidating. He just exclusively bullied quiet kids that wouldn't punch him until that fateful day. Next story. He was really small but walked around with 2 big goons. The last day of the 6th grade, his goons threw me in a trash can and I was very embarrassed. But I grew that summer by around 5 or 6 inches, and when I returned the next year, I was one of the tallest, biggest kids in school. So I went right up to that bully, picked him up, and threw him into a trash can. Felt good. Next story. One of the guys at my high school was known for effing with band members, messing with their instruments for laughs. Well, got drunk and drove his car through a concrete barrier and died in a canal. Almost no one gave a crap or went to the memorial. Their parents threw a fit at the school because nobody went. Pulled their younger sister out too. She was one of his biggest victims. Next story. I had a bully in 4th grade. He'd hit me, tease me, get others to tease. He tried taking my lunch money. Then, years later, I became a teacher, and my principal was the admin with the school I was at and oversaw my student teaching. He remembered me and recalled what I went through. Since it was years later, he told me a part of the story he couldn't tell me or my folks. The kid's parents were using him as a bargaining chip in their divorce. So I guess the bully was getting his comeuppance while bullying me? I think my point is most bullies are passing their pain onto someone else for relief. I can't imagine a 9-year-old having the maturity to realize and compartmentalize their pain. This is where I learned forgiveness isn't for other people, it's for yourself. Next story. Boy I absolutely hated in 6th grade would always make digs at me because I was a tall, geeky girl who would verbally fight back. He never did anything too bad. He was just mean and would pretend to hit me to make me flinch, but I never did, which I think just made him hate me more. And he just kept getting held back for behavioral issues, which isn't something I even knew could happen. The 6th grader still walked from class to class in lines like the little kids, and one day I saw him in line and I just busted out laughing. He lost his crap though, and I expected to get in trouble because I very much did start it, but I think the teacher knew he tormented me the previous year. And so then he ended up either dropping out or getting expelled from middle school at 17. Never made it to high school. I heard he stabbed another kid with a fork, which made the entire district switch to plastic. How does that solve the issue though? But no idea where he is now. Next story. My first year of teaching, a kid who was basically a less psychotic Cartman had wound up this nice, polite, quiet girl for months. About a week before the end of the year, she snapped. smashed him clear across the nose, got him just right and just exploded with blood. Then she went straight to the head teacher and admitted it, and that she knew she had to be punished. She got a couple of extra days off with no real punishment. Next story. Wasn't a school bully, but he argued and made an ass of himself until the teacher cried and then laughed at that. One day, he came in with his head in his sleeve and he was head down at his desk sobbing quietly, and I effing laid into him, taunting and provoking him, and he ran out of the class. I'm sure he was legitimately going through something, but I didn't care. He was such a jerk to our math teacher, and she was so damn nice. Next story. It took a few years longer than we all expected, but he was arrested and finally locked up when he was like 26. He was held back 3 times as a kid, so he was 3 years older than all of us at graduation, and he was always a jerk for no reason other than just being a jerk and being strong. From the word of mouth from a friend of a friend who was a CO at the prison, Bully got into a fight with someone, got stabbed a few times too many, and then bled out. This would have been in like 2010, 2011, and the small town that I was from ran his obituary in their paper, but it didn't list a funeral service or anything. Well, everybody, I think the lesson here is that every now and then some people only speak one language and need to be humbled. I really do think that sometimes you just get too big, your ego needs to pop or deflate, and you realize, oh, I'm like everyone else, or oh, I can talk crap and get smacked in the face. And sometimes it helps, maybe. As for me, since I like to share relevant personal stories to the videos, I didn't get bullied too much throughout my time in school. There were 2 kids who were kind of annoying. They looked very similar, so I was mixing them up for a while. But one of them was just really annoying. Just a pest. That's the best way to put it. And I accidentally tripped him and he ate the sidewalk. And I didn't like him, so I just kept walking, but I kind of felt bad about it, hoping he wouldn't snitch on me. But then word spread around that I trip him, and I guess he left me alone after that. So problem solved. And then the other guy was a Jehovah's Witness, and he sucked. Nobody, I guarantee you, nobody likes him to this day. That's just how confident I am about that other guy. But anyway, guys, we're at the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, commenting. Have a really good day, and bye-bye.